Good morning and welcome to Coverings Connected and this morning's webinar, Knowing Your Rights, Preparing for a Safety Inspection. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items. All attendees are in listen-only mode. You can submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions section of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will share with the presenters during the Q&A at the end of the presentation, getting to as many as time allows. If you are having problems connecting or any other issues, often closing the window and starting a new window will fix the problem. If you are having problems with your computer audio, call the number on your invitation to listen via your phone. The audio pin for this session is 79# or hashtag, depending on what generation you're in. The session will be recorded and made available on the Coverings site after Coverings Connected. Don't miss all the other great Coverings Connected opportunities available through coverings.com today through Thursday. I would now like to introduce our two great presenters, Mark Meriaux, Accreditation and Technical Manager, Natural Stone Institute, and Jonathan Mitnick, Partner, CCS Stone, Inc. Take it away.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us for this webinar, Knowing Your Rights, Preparing for a Safety Inspection. Thanks for the great introduction, Allie. I'm Mark Meriaux with the Natural Stone Institute. We've got Jonathan Mitnick with us. Allie sounded so good, I think Jonathan and I are going to sound like a couple guys sitting on the couch having a conversation compared to her well-rehearsed presentation. But John, you want to tell us about yourself?
Yes, I'm Jonathan Mitnick, partner in CCS Stone. It's a fabricator and importer in New Jersey. We've been in business for over 50 years, second generation. I'm pretty active with the Natural Stone Institute. I'm a former safety committee chairman and current board member. Always participating in events like this for safety, together with Mark and other members of the Stone Institute. So thanks for joining us, and if you have any questions, let us know.
Without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So the learning objectives of this session are going to be reviewing an inspection checklist that we have available that can help you and your company in case an OSHA enforcement inspector comes knocking at your door. So we've got some resources we'll go over with it to help you prepare ahead of time before that ever happens. And we'll discuss consulting options, other outside consulting options that can help you identify risks in your facility or in your businesses. We'll go over some of the requirements for record keeping, testing requirements, and how those protect you and your employees and your company. And we'll go over some of the tools available from the Natural Stone Institute and from other resources that can help you make your facility safer. And then the last part is we'll cover a document. Some of these documents are in the little handout box on your GoToWebinar panel. So these handouts are all downloadable that we'll discuss today. They're also available on the Natural Stone Institute website, everything except for the PDF of this session. So if you want to have these slides for later, you can go ahead and download those now or anytime during the presentation. First, I'll cover, this is taken from an email. I get regular emails from a number of different OSHA regions, and this is pretty typical. Quarter after quarter, year after year, the top 10 most cited standards for all industries, not just the stone industry. So if you look at all industries, which includes construction, manufacturing, all the businesses out there, these are the top 10 most cited. So the biggest ones that people get written up for. Generally, and these fall protection, that's usually going to be on construction sites. Scaffolding, 1 and 3. Hazardous communication, that's one we'll talk about today. That's just regular training and record keeping information, stuff that everybody can be doing. It just takes some time and a little bit of paperwork. Lockout, tagout, which is important in our industry. The big machines that are powered up have lots of electrical power going to them for those big motors and big pumps. So it's important to de-energize those and lock out and tag out when those are out of service or being worked on. Ladders, not a huge item for our stone industry members. Respiratory protection is a huge one. Forklifts, another big one. Fall protection. I said the scaffolding and fall protection applies mostly to our cladding and exterior panel folks. And then machine guarding, obviously, and the eye and face protection. Now, if we drill down a little bit and go take a more focused look directly at our industry, now OSHA's fiscal year runs October 1 through September 30th every year. So I pulled the data. I updated this from for last year's data, and the number one most cited standard is, guess what? It's with respirable crystalline silica. So all that silica dust, we've been trying to help and share information and resources to everybody to make their shops safer, have the testing performed, make safer workplaces for your employees. Respiratory protection in general is right below that. You can see that paperwork, HAZCOM, number 3. So 1, 2, and 3, pretty focused things. We can go into more detail on any of those. Powered industrial trucks, that's what I said. The top 5, you can see these top 10 cover, I think, over 75% of all of the fines levied. Pretty eye-opening. So we're going to go over some things you can do to prepare before an OSHA officer like this pretty guy shows up at your door. First of all, prepare in advance. It's what you're doing today, learning about resources that are available for you. Use an inspection planning checklist like the ones you can download in the handout section here. You can use an on-site consultation with an OSHA officer or other third-party safety officer. Have these required documents ready, posted if necessary. If you're supposed to have legal posters up for Department of Labor reasons, have all those up and available to all of your workers. General worksite cleanliness, and then having health and safety training documents and the records of the training available, and all that's part of your record keeping duties for OSHA. First plug I'm going to give you is for the Natural Stone Institute's safety page. So naturalstoneinstitute.org/safety. This is a shot of our current page with our COVID-19 crisis that's out there. We have a couple of resources specifically dealing with issues due to the coronavirus outbreak. These were taken, I think, from OSHA recommendations on general safety. So we've got it in English and Spanish, and then a general guidance to prepare your workplace to address those issues. And then we also have some of the lists for the employer postings that you have to have necessary, lists for the record keeping documents, and then the health and safety training topics on that page there. So that's a first, and all of the Natural Stone Institute's safety resources are free and available to anybody in the industry. I think through our Natural Stone University, we'll talk about a little bit later. You do have to set up some login or user information to access that, but it is free. There's no charge for that information, for the safety information. Like I mentioned, we have a specific COVID-19 response page. So we have a lot of topics specific for stone companies and construction in general. Here's just some of the items that are on there. I got a question just yesterday on consumer information, cleaning and disinfecting instructions. We've got that down at the bottom. So the first thing we'll cover is just the required employer postings. Jonathan, jump in anytime you want to. Tell me what you're doing in your shop. That's different from what I tell folks here. But so you've got to have the posters up and in prominent location, the safety signs up, and emergency telephone numbers, emergency evacuation routes, the maps of your facility laid out for exits, first aid kits, not just available, but make sure they're stocked, substance abuse policies, and a new one due to the COVID-19 or the the workplace illness and injury forms, the OSHA Form 300 and 301 reporting that you have to have posted between February 1st and April 30th. For next year, if you have employees that were exposed to or contracted the coronavirus, you are supposed to list that on your Form 300 on your accident and injury forms, because it's been deemed by OSHA to be a workplace reportable injury. Here's your typical DOL minimum wage and federal posting requirements forms. These are taken at shops around the country. And right here in the center, I've got a brand new one that's the Family Leave Act requirements. This is a new one that's required due to COVID-19. Again, in the PDF that's also downloadable in the handouts section, it will have these slides. There will be a hot link, so you can go directly to this poster right here. I don't know if you can see my hand, but it's popping up the hot link that goes directly to the Department of Labor, where you can download a copy of this, print it out, and have it posted. General work site. Jonathan, tell them how to keep your general work site prepared.
Well, a lot of the things are, common sense. So if you're looking at fire extinguishers, for instance, I mean, your general fire inspection from your, local fire marshal is pretty much going to point that out to you. If you have, a service contract with your fire suppression company, but these fire extinguishers should be checked regularly and make sure they're up to date. And in obvious places, clearly marked. Exit signs. Again, just common sense. They should be clearly marked. If it's not a true exit, it should not. You shouldn't have an exit sign, or you should make it clear that this is not an exit. From the inside of the building and the outside of the building, because if someone's going to come, police or any other rescue is going to want to enter, and they're going to try to get into a door that's barricaded on the inside somehow, or crates are in front of it. It really makes a lot of sense to have clear, active exits and entrance. The engineering controls and the lockout, tagout is very important. Just having a lockout, tagout box in your facility is going to show an OSHA inspector that you're conscientious about that. It's important to use them too, and have someone who's designated who would be in charge of when machinery is going to be powered down to be serviced and so forth, when the lockout, tagout system should be implemented. Electric tools, grounds, cords. I mean, working in an environment where you have power and water, you just have to pay attention. It's common sense safety. So if you see power cords that are compromised, frayed ends, missing grounds, just throw them out. Don't even try to repair them. If you notice that some of your outlets are showing signs of maybe some kind of failure or scorching, they should be checked and removed. Looking at all the equipment that's used on a day-to-day basis is important, because it's getting used and it has wear and tear. And when it shows signs of wear, it's up to the employees and the employer to recognize it, take it out of service. The hoisting equipment is another thing. OSHA requires that if you have cranes, that you run them, all the way up and all the way down every day. And run the length of the rail and so forth to make sure it's in operating condition. That on your hook, that there's a safety latch on the hook. If you have a hook without a safety catch on it, it's a violation. And then things like forklift training also wasn't stated there, but OSHA will look for the forklift, the operator certificate. Make sure that they've had forklift training, so anyone who's using the forklift ought to know. And then, take the daily protocols to make sure that the forklift isn't leaking fluids and mechanically is operating properly. And then when they sit on it, make sure you wear your seatbelt. So that's it in a nutshell.
And here's just some images of some of those items. Another one I didn't think was on that list, but is on this page displayed, are these the chemical labeling. So if you guys buy bulk items of any chemicals or any liquid products, and repurpose them or put them in other containers, you're required to label those to let anyone knows who may handle those what's in that bottle or what's in that can or what's in that container. So you can buy blank items like this, but just putting things like acetone or even water for that matter in a secondary bottle left out, you want to know that it's water and not some chemical that could be accidentally ingested. Like Jonathan mentioned, cables like this, you just want to throw away. Don't even make an attempt to repair it. Just the cost of the cable, yeah, they're not cheap when you buy the big heavy ones, but it's a whole lot less than a even the minor OSHA fine. I usually in some of these sessions point out that I think the first offense minor fines can now be levied up to, it's over $14,000 per incidence. So you can buy a whole lot of new drop cords for that. And when Jonathan was talking about exits, I get the opportunity under normal conditions to visit quite a few shops around the country on a regular basis, so I ask about things when they've had inspections or inspectors come by, invited or otherwise. And one of them that I heard about was they had a sink box ready to go out for a job that day, and the installer or tradesman had set it down near an exit door, and the OSHA officer wrote them a citation because that item was blocking the exit for that short period of time. So just train your guys and gals, let them know that you just can't block the exits, set things down, use your brains, just put it right into the truck or right, but you can't block those exit doors either. It's some may think it's overkill or stupid or too much, but depending on how the inspection's going, it can go very easily or it can be very difficult. So.
Also, the inspector will look at your electric panels too, so they should have clear access and nothing obstructing them also.
Yep. So more stuff on the general work site is fall protection, general overall cleanliness. Is it I know most stone shops are, compared to other industries or other businesses, may look or feel kind of dirty, but I've been in some stone shops that are quite clean, like a high-end manufacturing plant. Even OSHA doesn't expect everyone to go that far, where the floor's clean enough to eat off of, but general cleanliness, not having a lot of junk sitting around or unused or unlabeled stuff scattered about or garbage that should probably just be discarded, debris. Overall cleanliness is a big one when an inspector walks in and just takes an initial look around. Other things you might not think about are washrooms or changing rooms. Make sure there's adequate facilities available so people, especially now with the viral issues, make sure people can wash and keep their hands clean and sanitary. And proper illumination. It's unsafe to work in the dark, so make sure that you've got enough light to work safely. Record keeping, this one I've mentioned, I think it was number 2 or number 3 on our hot list at the beginning of these slides. So some of this, like I said, is easy to do if you just do it, but it takes time and it takes a little bit of manpower just to generate the records. So documentation that visitors coming onto your site, evidence of employee involvement. OSHA likes to see that you're involving all levels of your employees on the production floor into the offices, that they all have input into the improvement or safety in the overall shop. The posting and the accident logs I mentioned, accident reporting, illness and accident, medical records, and any medical examinations or test data that you're required to maintain. Make sure that's on hand or in your employee files. Training records. So you don't want to it's good to make sure people are trained and aware of safety issues, but having records of that training is just as important from OSHA's standpoint, so you can make sure that everybody knows and understands how to work safely for themselves and their coworkers. Operating permits for things like Jonathan mentioned, the forklifts, the overhead cranes, And then procedures in place to make sure if someone's out or ill, someone else is in to back them up to maintain these items and double check each other. Big one that we talk about in some of our other education are backup and preservation of records. I've heard of a number of companies being either hacked, e-crimes, or just computers going down. So just backing up this information for legal periods, for not just legal reasons, but for your own well-being and safety. So I mentioned this one before, but these are the injury and illness report, and there's the Form 300 you're supposed to have posted right now until the end of this month, February 1 through April 30th every year for the prior year. So next year's posting, the Form 300 will include any confirmed COVID cases from your employees. But you can do a lot of this reporting now directly through OSHA online. You can enter these online. The only thing paperwork-wise you would need to generate then would be the printout form that you have to post. So just general training, safety and health training. So just having something as simple as job descriptions clearly written out, with including health and safety responsibilities for each position. Make sure that each worker in your facility knows that they're responsible for not just themselves, but everybody around them. Performance evaluations, you should touch on any safety, or at least question your employees about any improvements in safety and health conditions that you can make in the overall facility. And you should have a key person, whether it's an HR manager, a general manager, shop manager, a safety manager, that's responsible for administering and record keeping for your safety and health program. And that same thing, the training and documentation, you want to make sure that there's documentation that your employees have not only received, but understand this information.
Yeah, so Mark, I just want to point out that there should be, the point person that's going to be familiar with the, the requirements from OSHA and from OSHA inspection, so that, in fact, that be the person designated if you do get a visit from a compliance officer. Because a lot of the questions that are raised is, what do? You get a visit from a compliance officer. Do you just let him in? Do you, who talks to him? What do you give him? So there's a couple of points there that if someone who's actually been groomed for that task will have some, key answers and know precisely what to do, rather than fumfering and guessing, what this next step is.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I think that's covered a little later. If not, we'll make sure to remind me. We'll make sure we cover that. What happens when an enforcement officer shows up at your door unannounced? So, but these are some of the things you can do ahead of time still. The safety and health training, document. Record all your safety meetings. Record any things like the Natural Stone University's online university you can use as a tool. It records each person that takes safety courses in that university. So we have some of our larger member companies use that as their main training platform for safety issues because of the record keeping function. So, and these are questions you can ask your employees. Do we have enough training resources? Are there other risks in our shop that we need to share with other employees? And then make this a regular to-do item every year. Refresher training, some of the key things like slab handling. I get reports, I think it was, oh goodness, I think over 15 fatalities in our industry last year from slab and material handling injuries, or not injuries, but accidents. So even just a non-fatal accident is too many, but things like that you want to cover regularly and make sure people aren't becoming complacent, and that you're documenting that training. The reason we're going through all this is just because now's the time to take a moment and review your safety policies and procedures if you have none, start with something. Start with a little bit. Just make small changes, small improvements. Start with a safety meeting this week. Start next week with a safety meeting. Start with something, because when that enforcement officer does show up, any effort that you can show them that you're making for overall worker and safety in your facility is going to go a long way in some of the citations that they will choose to pay attention to. So here's some of we're going to go into some of the consulting options. And the first one that we recommend, probably the strongest, is going with what's called an OSHA on-site consultation in every state of North America, and you have free consulting available. We call it OSHA consulting, but in most states it's through your Department of Labor or Labor Board. Sometimes it's through a technical college or university that has an industrial health or industrial safety program. They take that responsibility in many states. But the best thing is it's free. It's paid for already by your taxes. So you're paying for it whether you use it or not. There are local offices that are usually ex-enforcement folks. If they're not ex-enforcement, they know them very closely, so they know some of the key items that are written up or that they look for in your area, in your local area. You can choose whether it's a full review of your entire shop, comprehensive, or you can invite them in to perform specific tasks, just like noise sampling or noise test or air sampling. And they give you a realistic time for any corrective actions that are identified. So any risks or anything that you're asked to correct, that's one thing I will say is your only strong, hard, fast obligation to using this program is that any corrective actions that these voluntary officers find, you agree to correct them. That's the only hard, fast rule in this program. So anything they find during that inspection, you have to agree beforehand that you will correct them. They give you a realistic amount of times to do that. And for example, a lot of the corrective actions, like those frayed cords we showed in those slide earlier, things like that, discarded or mislabeled or unused containers, sometimes just throwing that away, you just report, say we took it out of service or discarded it, was thrown away, out of use, no more, out of the shop. You just self-report that, and there's no follow-up inspection. For some more detailed or more larger items, they may require a secondary follow-up visit just to make sure it's corrected or it's corrected adequately. You can invite them out again to verify that as well. Another big thing for this program is it does not trigger an enforcement inspection. It's part of the OSHA page here. If you go to the link here on this page, again, the PDF document has this as a active hyperlink, so you can just click right there. It'll take you directly to the OSHA page. But it will, it's completely separate. The personnel are separate. The offices are separate. And it's not like they call up each other if they find you have risks in your shop. They don't call the enforcement officers and you better get over here quick. These consultation folks are really looking out for your best interest and the best interest of your workers. They have a genuine, heartfelt want and duty to keep the workers safe and do everything they can to help you as an employer make that safer workplace. Any comments on this, John?
Yeah, no, you did a great job of explaining it. It's important to point out that, the on-site consultants are not part of the compliance arm. So, a lot of people get discouraged because it says OSHA in their title, but they have nothing to do with them other than trying to bring businesses up to standard. Some of the things that you didn't list here include they do air sampling. So if you're concerned about airborne silica in your shop, they will provide the testing free of charge, give you the test results from the lab. But then again, if you're above the limits, permissible limits, then you're going to have to correct that, and there's going to be record of that. And the same idea, they offer forklift training. So, rather than spend money for a third party to, get that paperwork and get your guys trained, I mean, you could just do it through this program. So there's a lot of extra benefits from it that come along. And like you said, that these guys are there to help you. They want to work with you. It's kind of like a scared straight kind of environment where they might, give you a little bit of the riot act and kind of, make you understand how important it is. Because that becomes the real cost when there's an injury or somebody someone's safety is compromised. That's where you can find out the real cost, and they actually have a way to determine that from the OSHA website, which individual violation is going to cost you.
Yeah, one other thing I will mention, it's on here, the additional training and safety resources. So it's not like they come in, give you a list of corrective actions and say, see you later. Let us know when you get them fixed. If they do have a number of resources available, including training programs, they can help you put together paperwork and record keeping programs. They can help you with training. They will direct you to resources to help improve things like air quality or filtering. If they've seen other systems that have worked in other shops, they will provide you with resources and ideas that can help you make those improvements. They don't just leave you out there hanging. But again, OSHA is not the only place to go for consulting options. So we'll talk about a couple more of them here on these next couple slides. Probably the next least costly option we'll cover is working with your insurance carrier, workman's comp insurance carrier. Some of these bigger national firms may have a dedicated safety officer and sometimes can provide free or low-cost consultation services. Many of them are former or retired OSHA officers. So that, again, similar to the consultation directly from OSHA, these guys are familiar with the local environments and what the local officers are looking for, because they're working with other businesses and other business owners in your area on a regular basis. A benefit of working with your insurance company is it may help you or qualify for reduced premiums. And that goes for both any safety option. If you're participating in any voluntary safety, whether it's through OSHA, your insurance carrier, or even on your own, you can document that. You may qualify for reduced premiums or reduced rates. And I do like to point out that the insurance safety folks will be focused on minimizing your workman's comp risks as their main priority. So they're trying to minimize your risk and minimize the risk of a workman's comp claim or an injury. So that's going to be their number one focus, and not always general overall safety. And I'm not saying they're less focused on all the minutia that other on-site consultation officer might pick up, but they have a focus and a duty to their employer as well. Anything else on this option, John?
No, I mean it's good because if you wanted to get the experience of having a walkthrough and potential hazards, and you don't need to get a government related agency involved, and you want to do a third party, it gives you the options. I mean, you basically have the option whether you want to correct the issues or not, and there's nobody going to be policing you other than your insurance carrier, but they'll get you back with their premiums, but they won't necessarily, it's not a legal issue with them.
Yeah. Then moving on, the third main option for consultation would be just independent safety consultants or independent industrial hygienists. I will say that this option can get expensive. I mean, in the overall scheme of things, compared to one citation from an enforcement officer, it's relatively inexpensive. But compared to the other two consultation options, private consulting can be regarded as an expense. Same thing, these may be former OSHA officers or other corporate safety officers that have retired or looking to make a career on their own afterwards. Same thing, it may qualify you for reduced premiums, just having proof of a safety program in place. And a lot of these retirement officers, because of their former careers, have connections with other OSHA officers or other insurance officers and safety officers. So they can help you determine where those advantages are for reduced premiums. You might need multiple consultations, so you may not have just one officer. Now with OSHA, we mentioned it was free. The on-site consultation is free. If they take a second, they may have a general safety, inspector come do the walkthrough of your facility, and then have a second hygienist come in to perform audio testing or noise testing or air sampling duties. But there's still no cost. If it takes 5 people to come in and do all those, there's no cost. With these private consulting options, you may have to pay for multiple visits or multiple consultations from different types of safety consultants to do that. And as John mentioned, there's no hard, fast commitment to make the improvements after you get the information. Both the insurance and private consulting options, that's all they'll do. They may have some resources they'll provide you, but they'll give you a list of corrective actions, but there's no definite guarantee that you have to make those changes afterwards. And I had a former OSHA officer tell me a story about when he went into private consulting. He got hired by a private contractor, a large manufacturer, went in there, did his job, found all of the violations that they had in the shop, made a nice, beautiful report, presented it to the CEOs, and then 3 months later, none of the changes or improvements had been made that he recommended because it was too much time or too much expense, or they decided it wasn't a priority. He said it lacked the hammer to make those corrective actions. So that's again why I would recommend working with the state DOL or OSHA on-site consultative vision, just because it has a little more teeth in it to make you commit to correcting those items that they find in your shop. Any comments on those consulting options, John? Which ones have you used in your shops?
We've only used the on-site consulting.
Okay.
There's a local office in New Jersey that services us. Randy Hauser has been, in our place numerous times. Actually, did a Natural Stone Institute presentation in our facility, and it gives you the best option, because if you have any kind of safety concerns, you ought to address them. It shouldn't be a discussion of whether it should be done or not. It should be done, and you need the professional to point it out to you, particularly someone who is sensitive to what a compliance officer is going to be looking at. So a great place to start. And also you have the option. You don't need to go full comprehensive. You can use this, tax-free, tax-paid service that's, selective and specific. So if you just want to measure your air quality, or if you just want to get forklift training, you can just keep it specific. So that would be my preference. I don't need to spend more money where it's not, where the service is already there and it's paid for with the tax dollar.
I think it's pretty cool. You know the guy on a first name basis.
Yeah.
Again, going back to some of the paperwork, the record keeping requirements that they will look for when they come in are the accident reporting and logs, participation in training, so your toolbox talks, your training meetings, your safety meetings, all those things. Evidence of noise sampling, and then noise tests and air sampling that you should have done on a regular basis, and then other certifications like Jonathan mentioned, forklifts, crane, any other equipment that requires certification for operation. So some of those baseline tests that you should have done in your shop or in the facility to be compliant with the silica standard under OSHA, you should have air sampling done This is usually done in multiple areas around your shop, multiple different work activities, so to speak, for different duties in different parts of the shop, so they can get an overall idea of where exposures might be occurring or may be more sensitive or more problematic, and you can address those areas in your shop specifically, and it's not just an overall shop problem. Same thing with noise. The equipment or the polishers or the big machines where the majority of the noise is coming from, they'll test closer to those when they're in operation to make sure those are at or below safe levels, or that your employees are using the proper PPE to make sure they don't experience hearing loss. Other employee health tests that can be required under certain stipulations of the standards. So some of the things for silica exposure, if you're unable to get below the exposure levels, you may require additional health tests, so x-rays or lung tests or lung spirometry. For DOT, obviously, you have to have a health exam if you're have people operating DOT registered vehicles on the road, and then hearing exams. Jonathan, you had some of these done just as a general practice, right?
Yeah, well, when we did the comprehensive on-site, it encompasses hearing, air sampling. So they're doing noise levels. They're checking, machinery, making sure there's blade guards. Looking, at various different things, and this is included in that. So hearing and air quality.
But so say I'm a shop owner or a shop operator, and now Mark and John are telling me I've got to pay for medical tests and doctor visits too. Why would I want to pay for that? Why is that a good idea?
Well, you need baseline testing. So if you're going to come and want to work in my shop and you're coming from another shop, I want to make sure that you don't have any pre-existing conditions or something that might become an issue for us down the road. So the baseline testing is important to see if someone working in a shop, for instance, has any kind of lung compromise through breathing in dust, or has any hearing impairment from loud machines, or any other things that might surface in a general health inspection. So it's very important, because once you bring an employee into your place and that employee becomes sick, and it could be related to the productivity in the shop, this will ultimately become the liability of the employer. So it's important to iron that out and get record of it on all new employees.
Great point. So you can potentially reduce your future liability just by providing these either on an onboarding or even on a regular interval. So now I'll go into some of the resources available. This just looks like a bunch of blue links on this page, but again, if you download the handout documents, these will all be active hyperlinks, and they all are separate information pages. So I've showed you a couple slides. One was the Natural Stone Institute /safety. We also have Natural Stone Institute /silica, which directly address some of the current silica standards and training and issues that you can implement to comply with that. We have this little green technical module, Safety in the Stone Business, that you can download a copy of, or you can purchase printed copies of those. These are dual language documents. I think we have a French version as well, but they're dual language documents. So one book has both English and Spanish in it. On the safety page, we have direct links to the OSHA inspection planning checklists, and also a link to help create a silica exposure control plan, which should help satisfy some of that written and training documentation under the silica standard. A lot of toolbox talks and other training in the Natural Stone University I mentioned, which is www.uofstone.com. You will have to, if you've never visited there before, to access those courses or those classes, you will have to create a user ID, but there's no charge for any of the safety training or the safety training information on the university. We also have health and safety videos, both downloadable or DVD if anybody still uses those. Safety posters like this in English and Spanish, and then general training documents and called our management toolkit, which includes job descriptions for a lot of the jobs in many shops and installation workers in our stone industry. So a lot of these resources are available. The management toolkit and safety posters, I think, are printed or download goods that do have a price tag to them. And we also have things I have pictured on here, a health and safety handbook, which was the precursor to the inspection planning checklist that we have now. And Natural Stone Institute isn't the only place that you can find resources. So OSHA has a number of resources available directly to you. So I showed you the consultation page. You can click on that little map in every state of the U.S. For local offices you can work with or invite out. They also have training and sample programs available that you can download and implement. And they also have the Safety, Health, and Achievement Recognition Program. This is once you're involved, you already have a good safety plan in place. This is a safety recognition program they call SHARPS program. Some of the big manufacturing companies around the U.S. participate in this. This is really it's almost like an award for safety. It's a way to be recognized as the highest achievement in safety from OSHA's eyes, and they actually give you a recognition if you achieve that. And obviously, good, better, best, better, good. There are always other training resources, private resources. These are some of them that we can recommend for some of the just basic first aid and CPR training, workplace safety training through these other sites. If you have workers dealing with silica in the field, I will say that the Natural Stone Institute's silica resources have been concentrated mostly on workers in the shop, or what OSHA calls the general industry environment. Other organizations like masonry contractors have focused more on workers in the field, so we didn't see a need to duplicate those resources. So things like the Silica Safe website, they can help you with creating a safety plan or complying with the standard that governs your workers in the field, or what OSHA calls construction. So there's general industry, and then there's construction for silica. Construction, we usually recommend the Silica Safe website. And then for our quarry operators, obviously MSHA has some, they default to OSHA on quite a few safety issues, but they have some quarry specific safety issues, but you want to work directly with them if you're in that segment of our industry. I will cover, because I didn't add it in here, what does an inspection look like? What happens when an OSHA officer shows up? And you've been through on-site consultation, Jonathan, so you can confirm or correct me on any of these, but it usually starts, they'll come in and introduce themselves. An enforcement officer isn't allowed to just immediately start walking into their shop. They do check in first and ask if you have a general manager, owner, safety manager, someone that can answer their questions first. And so it generally starts, even a shop enforcement inspection will start with an initial sit-down visit.
That's correct. The compliance officer is usually going to show up unannounced. It's very rare that they're going to let you know in advance that they're coming. Certain things will trigger that. Could be, an injury that occurred. It could be a whistleblower. It could be maybe you're on a hot list, which a lot of stone shops now, because there's the presence of this, the silica and the mandate. That it becomes an area where OSHA may want to investigate further. So a lot of things can trigger the visit once the compliance officer shows up. Usually, because they're showing up unannounced, in order to get a manager or somebody, there is a certain amount of time that they'll allow you before they look at it as a delay. And it's usually about a half an hour up to an hour. So there's really no great emergency for just to let the guy in and cowl to it. I mean, You know, the plan should be whoever greets people entering your place of business should be briefed on a you know, a plan for a visit by a compliance officer. You know, let him know he can wait, and you know, ask him. You can ask for his credentials because they have to prove to you. I mean, there's a lot of scammers out there. People showing up, telling you to give them money so you won't get a fine. And by the way, they won't do that. You'll never have a visit from a compliance officer who's asking you for payment on the spot. You know, that's just, you know, completely wrong. But once they get through that, you know, there's some things that that need to be done. I mean, someone who is basically groomed for the task of meeting with the compliance officer should be brought up front. He or she ought to be armed with the information that's going to that the officer would be immediately looking for, which is your injury and illness reports, and you know, and some of the general information covered in the webinar earlier. And they love that. You know, a compliance officer loves to see that you're, you know, doing the right thing and making an effort, and that you have a, you know, a box and files of meetings and reports and things that cover topics that are for the health and welfare of your employees. So that's all great stuff. But at a certain point, he's going to want to walk through the facility, and at that point, the compliance officer, you know, is going to want to walk through, hopefully during the half an hour or an hour that he was being asked to wait in the front office. If you had any obstructions or anything in front of your exits or things that, you know, obvious violations, you know, that would be the chance to correct them. You know, if someone left that box with a sink in front of the door, that would have been an easy correction and you know, avoiding a fine. So, you know, the officer's going to want to walk through the facility. These days, they're taking video, they're documenting things. Whoever the point person is ought to be shadowing the compliance officer. You can be doing what they're doing. You could be videotaping, asking questions, making notes the same way that the officer is doing. So, because their information is not going to be shared with you, only in the form of a fine or you know, written up as violation.
Yeah.
So
let me jump in here, Jonathan. Yeah. I will say, so a lot of this information is on the OSHA website as well, and it's also available under the consultative page, because the consultation from the DOL or OSHA officer is going to be nearly identical to an enforcement visit. So they'll come in, they'll tell you what they're there for. Sometimes they may provide a reason, whether it was they'll certainly show up for an injury or a severe injury that is, you know, these awful things that make the news when a fatality occurs, they show up that day or the next morning. But if an ex-employee, disgruntled employee, whatever, they'll say, we had a report or a call about overall safety, here's what we're for. They will tell you they're there because of fill in the blank. They don't have to have, it's not like cops with a search warrant, they can go around. Another thing Jonathan mentioned, there is a national enforcement program in place that for these enforcement officers to be focused on individual industries. And unfortunately, stone and tile is one of those target industries. Stone, tile, masonry, concrete, all of us are in that targeted workplace. So if you've got granite, stone, tile, all of those in the name of your business, I can almost guarantee are going to come up on a short list. In places like New Jersey, where Jonathan's from, the enforcement officers or the consultation officers were nice enough to send out letters to those companies ahead of time saying, hey, be on the lookout, or if you want to work with us, we're available. Come help you, you know, before enforcement comes knocking. So, but usually the visit will start first with the introduction, so make sure your greeter or everyone in your shop knows what to do when someone walks on your site, who they're supposed to go get, who's the manager, who's the general manager, who's the ops manager, who's the safety manager I'm supposed to go get for this officer to communicate with when they show up. The next thing will be initial consultation. So they'll sit down, it can be in a conference room, it can be in the lobby, but they may ask to see some of those training records and documents like Jonathan mentioned, and that's where you'll make big strides in starting off on a good foot if you have that information available to present right away firsthand. The next thing will be the walkthrough, and it usually consists of them walking through the shop. They may stop and ask some of your employees. They may talk to your employees, ask them questions about what safety procedures are in place. So some of that, they'll not just take your word on the training, they'll interview individual employees to make sure that that training is happening. They'll take pictures. You are allowed to take pictures of the same pictures they're taking so that you know what documentation occurred at the time that officer was in your facility. Then once all that information is gathered, before they leave, they'll have a closing conference with you. So opening conference, the walkthrough, then the closing conference. They'll go through some initial things that are found, but then you'll be presented with a report afterwards. And this is true both for the consultative non-findable visit or the enforcement visit. You'll get a report afterwards, which is usually sorted by most severe safety violations to less severe safety violations. So the biggest ones are going to be front and center that you need to address first and foremost. Is that what's happened in your case, Jonathan? That's the way I understand it.
Yeah, well, it's pretty much right on target. The points that you brought up are very important. If you're have someone who knows how to handle the compliance officer when they visit, because I think that these guys are pros and they pick up on people's emotion. They know if you're lying, they know if you're hiding something. So the best thing to do is be prepared and give a positive attitude, give these people what they want, answer their questions politely, don't be on the offensive. For a majority of ex-compliance officers, who've commented about their experiences, say for the most part, everyone's nervous when they get a visit, but a majority are very cooperative and open and willing, and that shows, and that's a big plus. On the other side, if you have that 5 or 10% of the people who are just on the offensive, got something to hide, it kind of sets the stage for how that further investigation is going to take place. So it pays to be nice and polite.
Good.
Hey, Mark and Jonathan, we only have a couple minutes left. So we have a couple of questions. I'm going to have Aaron Danke from the Natural Stone Institute ask you a couple questions. If we don't get to your question, I really apologize, but we do have them. And what we'll do is we will forward them to Mark and Jonathan, and we will ask them to answer them for you and email the answers to you. So I apologize if we don't get to them. Aaron, if you can ask a couple questions, we're going to get short answers from you, Mark and Jonathan, because we're running out of time. And then again, if we didn't get to your question, I will have them reach out to you directly.
Yeah, Mark and Jonathan, thank you again for a great presentation. You brought up that the OSHA voluntary consultation is free. What happens if you are an OSHA in the OSHA voluntary consultation and enforcement agent shows up?
Well, that's a great question. Yeah, basically, once you initiate your relationship with the OSHA on-site consultant, it basically gives you immunity from a compliance visit, because at that point you're under the guidance of the on-site consultant, and they're working on remedying and bringing the business into full compliance. So it's work in progress. They share that type of information at that level with compliance to make sure that they know that they're getting the information they need so they can bring their companies into that level. So if you want to chime in also, Mark, but it's almost like a year. So if you do this year over year, you're almost immune from a compliance visit, unless someone gets seriously injured or there's just a blatant disregard for health and safety.
Yeah, I usually tell people it's the closest thing to a get out of jail free card in the old game Monopoly. It's not a guarantee, but because you've had that consultative visit and they know you're proactively working on safety issues in your plant, if you have had that consultative visit and have the report and the corrective actions, the My understanding is that the enforcement officer is not allowed to conduct an inspection during that time. You can even present the report and say, look, these are the items we're working through. We've got 30 days, 45 days, 90 days, whatever was agreed upon with the consultative officer to correct those items. And during that period of time, you're not supposed to be fined for those as violations, because it's understood that you're in the process of correcting those. I've heard of some weird things happening where people have received some fines, but they're greatly reduced. Just knowing that you're proactively working on safety and not just complete disregard.
Okay. Jonathan, there's a great question coming in. I think you might have some experience with it. Darcel is building a new facility. Can OSHA be involved in that process to make sure that they're compliant when they open the facility?
I wouldn't say OSHA. I would say the on-site would be able to get involved. I'm sure anywhere where there's workers and there's any kind of health or safety concerns, this applies. So if it's a work site and it's there's things going on that are related to some of the processes that we talked about in the webinar, they fall into that category. I kind of find it hard to believe that any job site would not fall into it, but if there's any kind of potential for injury or any dangers, then yes, of course.
Well, yeah. I think the question was around if they're building a new building, a fabrication facility, and if they're in the process of building that facility right now, can you reach out to OSHA Voluntary during that process?
Oh,
they can come
I'm
in?
sorry, yeah, I didn't understand the question. Yeah.
I'll say that it's highly unlikely that they would come out at that point, and it's easy to get confused between all the government agencies, but OSHA doesn't certify or regulate safety of an item specifically. They're more concerned with the safety of the workers and the individuals in the shop. So my understanding is that an OSHA officer is going to want, even the consultative folks are going to want to have the place open and operating, and some of that training in place. So unless things are working and moving and people are doing their jobs, there's no way for them to really truly evaluate the risks that may occur during normal operation.
One person brought up, has COVID-19 caused an increase in OSHA job site visits? Are they looking for shortages of masks or other things that would be used for protection against COVID-19?
I am not aware of any increased job visits. I think in reality, they're probably decreased because the officers want to reduce their exposures as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen any. I haven't heard of any. We're in a heavily affected area of the country right now. So if it's going to happen, it ought to. I would have seen it here for sure.
A good question.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We're going to close it up so we can all go about, but we want to thank you, Mark and Jonathan. Thank you, Aaron, for sharing with us today. Thank you for everyone who attended this session. Like we said, we will share the questions with both Mark and Jonathan, and obviously their email addresses are on the screen if you have any specific questions. Once you leave today's webinar, you're going to receive a survey on the presentation. We promise it's short, and we would appreciate if you could complete it and provide your feedback. Coverings 2021 will take place April 13th through 16th in Orlando, Florida. So look for more information on that in the coming months. And again, on behalf of Coverings Connected, on all of our presenters, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to see you back. Please stay safe and healthy.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.